clean laboratory. Basically what we're covering today is aquatic plant management, aquatic weeds that you would typically encounter in a wastewater setting. There's other things that could probably be covered that don't probably need to be because they don't relate so much to what you guys do. So what we'll cover basically is identify some different aquatic plants that you see in your ponds and what are the most suitable products to control those plants. There's a few other things too, but that's the basis of it. I've got a PowerPoint I'll go through, and I guess if there's questions during the thing, maybe we can just stick your hand up in the air and we can maybe address it. If you've got a question on a specific product or a weed or something, because once we move on, you might forget it, or the question might be lost, so to speak. So if you got something along the way, just call or stick your hand up or something. So, one thing I wanted to cover kind of first. A lot of you are aware of this. A lot of you probably aren't. I've got a letter from NPCA, and basically what it states is that because wastewater treatment pond systems are not listed as public waters, they do not need to have either an aquatic nuisance control permit from the DNR or to be applied by a licensed applicator. So essentially, any of you guys that are licensed operators, you can treat your ponds. They're not a public body of water, so the rules, that's how they're stated. So a lot of guys just aren't aware of that, so I wanted to make that clear. That whatever you need to do to your ponds, you basically have the authority to do that. So I wanted to start with that. Most of the products that we're going to cover today too, and the weeds and that are, the products that work to control the weeds. I've got sheets that are out in the room, so if you need more, we've got more up here, and there's some more in the back too. But it makes it a little easier to follow. Aquatic plant management. We've got emergent weeds, which would be cattails, bulrushes, things on that order. Rooted floating weeds. Then there's free floating weeds, and then there's submerged weeds. And that kind of encompasses the aquatic plant realm. Algae control. I like to start with this one because it is it's kind of a critical element to wastewater pond operation and your discharge and that. And all of you that have had algae blooms and algae trouble, and you're aware that they count the algae as a total suspended salt, and many times that interferes with your discharging and that. So some algae in the pond is pretty natural, and a lot of times it's not a problem, but when it gets elevated to a point where it starts pushing your TSS, then basically it's got to be treated. It's a microscopic plant. There's no true leaf stems or roots. It can reproduce by spore cells or fragments. There's over 17,000 forms of algae, and there's microscopic and macroscopic versions. The three types: planktonic, filamentous, and chera. Planktonic is the one that basically makes the water turn green, visibly green. It's like you take a jar of it, it looks like green Kool-Aid, And that's the planktonic algae. That's what's, going through the water column and elevating your TSS. The filamentous, I'll show you in a second. This is just planktonic algae here. The water becomes visibly green when it gets to, problematic levels. It can be, the water can either be green, blue-green, brown, or shades in between, basically. Here's a shot of blue-green algae, and you can see that that's kind of the pea soup that you hear about. That's pretty bad. And blue-green specifically can be toxic. You've all heard of that, and even specific, lake bodies and things like that. And there's some pictures of what that looks like. Filamentous algae. Usually, you've all seen it in lakes, ponds, outside of wastewater even. It just looks kind of like green hair, really. It's in filaments. And a lot of times it'll get kind of air pockets under it, and it'll bubble up and stuff like that when you're identifying it. It'll start along the bottom of shallow water, attaches to rocks and whatever else is present. It can float to the surface, forming large mats, and a lot of times you see that. Here's another picture of Filamentous Algae. It really does hang together, you know, it's like green hair or green cotton candy, you know. You've all had that probably on a fishing lure from time to time. That's the Filamentous Algae. Here's a larger shot of it. Here's another, a higher form of algae, a green algae. This has got more of a form to it. It's kind of got a net-like structure. That's typically not a problem in what we're looking at. Same with Chera. It's a higher form of algae. It's more of a plant type. Again, not a real problem generally as far as you know, TSS or anything like that. What causes algae? Algae thrives because of three main sources: sunlight, nutrients to feed on, and water. And so essentially wastewater ponds are almost a perfect environment for growing algae. They're shallow, they get a lot of sun, there's lots of nutrients there, so it's a perfect environment for algae. Some problems that algae causes, again the TSS is usually the issue that you know, is what we are addressing. So clogging discharge pipes and unsightly. Mechanical physical removal of algae, it's almost an impossible feat, you know, when we're talking planktonic algae. Filament, things like that, yeah, you could physically remove it, it'd be a job. But as far as chemical treatment, that's basically the only practical way to address it. We've got several different options. Years ago, when I first started, most people had algae problems, and a lot of you guys probably remember, we're using copper sulfate type products, the blue rocks, and you know, pulling around in a boat in a burlap sack or something to dissolve them and distribute the chemical through the water column. And it's a very effective, pretty low cost treatment for algae. The only problem is with that is that, you know, using it year after year after year after year, there's part of copper sulfate that is the elemental part of it is a metal. And so you start building up that copper as a metal in your you know, your bottom of your pond, your sludge in your bottom layer. So essentially, because of that, MPCA kind of pulled copper sulfate products off of the you know, the arsenal for using in wastewater ponds. What basically has taken the place of that is hydrothol 191. Hydrothol comes in a liquid or granule. We have both, but we sell very little of the granule. Generally, you guys are using it for algae, and the best way to distribute that through the water column, again, is in a liquid form. It's a salt of indole. The nice thing about hydrothol is not only does it kill algae, but it kills a whole host of other aquatic weeds. So a lot of times if we've got a situation where we've got a lot of algae in the water, but there's also coontail or pondweed, various forms of pondweed. If there's other things that we're trying to do two, three things at once, hydrothol is kind of a, you know, one-shot deal in many cases. So, but if algae is the problem, hydrothol is definitely the one that we go with. One thing we've found to be true, the application rate on hydrothol is kind of tricky. When you read the label, it's labeled for an acre foot, anywhere from a pint to 2 gallons and a little over 2 gallons. So it's kind of tricky. And when we first started, you know, using hydrothol, a lot of times we were shooting on the low end to try to save money. And what happened was a lot of times there just wasn't enough there to really knock the algae down. So as time's gone on, we've realized that because we're a nutrient-rich water and there is so much algae present, generally, if we're at the point where we're going to treat it, that we need to go at the higher rate. And that's 2 gallons per acre foot. One nice thing about the hydrothol is if basically one component of hydrothol will kill one component of algae. So if you go heavy, what happens is it just lasts longer. You're going to get the you know, the algacidal control for a longer period of time. So just because you're going at the higher rate doesn't mean you could have went maybe half that and got the job done. That might be true, but going at the heavy rate, it's just going to keep it clear longer. So it's really not wasted if you go, you know, at the higher level. What's bad is if you go too light and you don't get the kill you're looking for, because then you're back out retreating again. the hydrothol is what we recommend and the best thing we know of for treating, planktonic algae in wastewater ponds. Q-Train Ultra, that is a liquid copper-based product. So we still have that in our material here because it is a very effective algicide. It's very low cost, very effective. It's a liquid copper sulfate essentially with wetting agents in it to help disperse it through the water, and it does an excellent job. The problem again is that it's copper-based, so it's kind of off the table for wastewater ponds. If you've got a decorative pond or golf courses, things like that, they use this stuff all the time. So it's a little different. 130C, that's the old bluestone here, the old blue rocks. That's what was used for algae control for decades, prior to it being pulled in the wastewater application. Aquashade. Aquashade is something that I've got a lot of systems that use this strategy and it works very well. What Aquashade does is it's essentially a dye. You add it to the water, it prevents the sunlight from penetrating into the water, and the algae can't grow. So you basically suppress the algae by blocking the sunlight out. And we've got quite a few systems in the state that use this, and there's several different ways you can do it. Some guys just know every spring they're going to have a problem. As soon as the ice goes out, their pond's already green. I mean, if they put a hole through the ice, it's green under the ice. And some guys just know that. It's a perennial problem. And what some of those guys will do is they'll actually put the aquashade out on the ice. When the ice melts, the dye goes into the water. And at that point, they're combating, the algae growth from that point forward. Other guys, if they don't do that and the algae gets ahead of them, then you've got to come in treat it with a hydrothol. Kill the algae that's there, then you can add the aquashade. So you kill the algae present, add the aquashade, and you won't get any further, growth of the algae. So by your fall discharge, you don't have a problem. So some guys have a spring and fall problem. Some guys just have a fall problem, and some guys it's always a problem. So so there's a few different strategies you can use to combat it.
What does that aquashade do when you're discharging?
It just it dilutes out. A quart of that treats an acre-foot of water. At the average rate, you can go 2 quarts per acre-foot, but in time it does break down. So there's generally an initial dose that you add, and then once a month you usually add kind of a half a dose to keep the color up, to keep the dye up.
If you got a good treated pond, can you discharge it?
If you've got it in your pond, you can discharge, yes.
So for receiving waters, it doesn't matter.
We've never heard an issue with it. Yep. And it does, as it dilutes out, it's like any dye, as it dilutes, it's going to lose its potency or strength. And one thing we've also discovered with aquashade is primary, if you use it in a primary pond, it just eats it up. There's so much biological activity in the primary that it just breaks that dye down pretty fast. So it works great in the secondaries, and what a lot of guys will do is after they discharge their secondary, when you're transferring your primary into the secondary, they're adding dye to that water as it's coming into the secondary. So that's a pretty good strategy too. I won't go through each point of this here. We've got a generic aquashade as well, so there's another version of aquashade that we offer as well. This aqua shadow is basically the same thing in dissolvable bags. So you toss the bags into the pond and you don't get any on you, so to speak. If you do get some on you, one thing that works well is just bleach, because it will make your hands dirty, or your clothes, or your shoes. This is our other pond shade product, pond dye. That's it's a different label. It's not aqua shade, so we do offer an additional dye product. It's a little less money basically. Duckweed and water meal. Duckweed is on the left, water meal is on the right. The big difference is the size. The water meal is very small. Duckweed is also very small, but water meal is even smaller by comparison. They're free floating plants that can totally cover the surface of the pond, and you've all seen it, I'm sure. You know, a lot of times on a windy day, it'll all be over here, and then tomorrow it might be over there, and then on a calm day, the whole pond is covered with it. And it's generally not a problem. Watermeal, just to cover this real quick, it almost looks like duckweed. It's just a lot smaller. It is the smallest flowering plant in existence. It actually gets a little flower to it. Each one is a 1/16 of an inch wide. Okay, what causes duckweed and watermeal? They're caused by excessive nutrients in the water, which of course we have. Problems caused unsightly, and they block sunlight, which can cause lower oxygen levels. And to be honest with you, we don't get a whole lot of guys calling for duckweed or watermeal control. It's just usually, there's always some around, but it's usually not to the extent that it's causing a problem. The benefits from duckweed. The duckweed is an indicator that excessive nutrients exist in the water, so we know that. It does not contribute to water quality problems. It improves water quality by removing phosphorus and nitrogen from the water and naturally filtering unwanted matter in the water. So there is some benefit to having some of it. So, and you'll see that with a lot of these aquatic plants. Just because you've got some aquatic plants in your ponds doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem. It's just when it gets to, when it gets to be too much. Solutions for duckweed and watermeal, reward and sonar. Reward we'll talk about in a minute. Reward essentially to treat duckweed. There's not a lot of guys out here that are treating for watermeal. The duckweed, essentially what you do with the reward is you mix it with water and you have to spray it over the surface of that duckweed that's floating on top of the water. And you've got to almost contact each of those little grains of the duckweed. And so a lot of times it's just something you have to stay at it. You'll spray what's there, that dies off, and you'll see it brown out and die out. And there's always some more left, so you go out there another time and shoot that on top, spray it on top, and kill what's there. It's just something you kind of have to stay at. And like I said, unless it's so much that it's a problem, a lot of times duckweed just kind of gets left alone. So sonar. Sonar is another product that we basically only have for duckweed, and it does work well. The nice thing with sonar is you don't have to spray over the surface. You can literally walk out of the pond and just pour it in and walk away. But the only difference is the sonar, you've got to hold the water for 90 days, and it's also $2,500 a gallon. So we don't sell a whole lot of that. Reward. Reward is, the two that we sell the most of are Reward and hydrotol. Reward, it covers a lot of different weeds, and we'll get into that here. It states here it might require several treatments. I'll move forward here. Sonar, I'm going to go past that one. Identification of some weeds. Again, we're with products that Reward does a good job on. Eurasian water milfoil. Here's a picture of that. It looks a lot of times that gets confused with coontail or even northern milfoil. There's a native northern milfoil. It's a native Minnesota species. So, but the Eurasian milfoil is the one that we all know is a problem. It's 2 gallons per acre for that. Curly leaf pondweed. We see some of this. A lot of times it's not in abundance. Sometimes it can be, but it does have a visibly curly leaf on it. It's a pretty good shot of it there. A good treatment of that again is Reward. And when you see the Signet Select, the Signet Plus, that's a surfactant or a wetting agent that you just would add to the mixture of the water and the Reward, and it helps get a better kill. Here's some curly leaf pondweed. It's not the best picture, but that's where it's just really stacked in there. Coontail, submerged aquatic vegetation abundant in lake streams, marshes, ditches, and wastewater stabilization ponds. We see a lot of coontail out there. They're very tolerant of nutrient-rich water and fluctuating water levels. They can form a very thick mass, and that's probably when it gets to be problematic. Here's another picture of coontail. It's generally a long stem with the little tufts coming off of it. A lot of times these tips up here, you'll see them sticking out of the surface of the water. What causes coontail? Wildlife spread it around, human activity, flooding, natural events, and nutrient-rich water again. The problems that it can cause: stagnant water and odors due to stagnant water, That's again when it gets to be really thick and concentrated, and you start, it starts affecting the water movement in the pond. Canopies formed by coontail can shade out beneficial plants. Canopies can also suppress or prevent oxygen circulation, which is important in wastewater. And that is a good point, because we want our wave action in the ponds to add oxygen to the water. And a lot of times if you get too much weed growth in there, it becomes, even on a windy day, the water barely moves. So that's when it gets to be problematic. Coontail can be unsightly. It causes increased organic sediment and increased internal nutrient loading. The plants suck in nutrients, and when they die, they release the nutrients again. If the water is stagnant, it can also create prime insect habitat for mosquitoes. That's not a good thing. And then it can plug outlets, causing problems with discharging. And that's something we see a lot of, is when the coontail gets to be so abundant that it starts plugging up control structures and discharge pipes and things like that. And one thing a lot of times that people don't realize is you don't have to, if you've got a 10-acre pond, you don't have to treat the whole 10-acre pond. You may want to control a 1-acre area around your structure, your discharge structure. There's some guys that have spray irrigation systems and stuff, and they'll plug them right up with coontail and other weeds. And a lot of times we can just kind of keep clear that area around the structures and that. And that's a pretty good strategy, and it costs less money. And we can leave some of the weeds there. Mechanical physical removal is pretty, that's again a tough chore to physically remove coontail when it's gotten to that extent. You'd have to go out on a boat and hook on it and pull it. It'd be a job. So chemical control, hydrothol, reward, and sonar, basically the two that we usually go with are either hydrothol or reward. If planktonic algae is not a problem, if the water is essentially clear, but you've got a lot of coontail, then we just go with reward. It works like a charm. If you've got a problem with planktonic algae, your water is green, your TSS is high, and you've got coontail, then we can treat it with hydrothol and get it all at once. So that's the nice thing with hydrothol, is it gets everything. Yes?
Is there a detention time for reward? Can't be started?
Reward, yes, is it's 3 days discharge and 5 days if you've got a spray irrigation system where you're spraying the water onto a crop field or something like that. 5 days you can spray it onto the field essentially with a spray irrigation system. Otherwise, for restrictions on drinking and things like that. Reward for animals drinking is 1 day restriction. For lawns, 1 to 3 days, plants 1 to 3 days, and food crops is 5 days. So you can see it does break down pretty fast. So you treat it, does its job, and it breaks down. So that's good. The hydrothol, while we're talking about that, the liquid, the restrictions on hydrothol is 7 to 25 days on animal drinking, foraging 7 to 25 days, and food crops 7 to 25 days. So essentially 25 days. I don't think I'd go on the low side of that. So there is a difference there. That is a good consideration, whether to choose reward or hydrothol. And again, if you didn't have a problem with planktonic algae, I would use reward every time. Hydrothol would be just if you've got algae. And again, it's an alternative to copper-based algicide. Reward, we talked quite a bit about. Cattails. Cattails essentially, they're problematic if they do put down a root and they can break pond seals and things like that. That's probably the biggest concern with cattails. Other than, wastewater ponds are a facility and they should look like a facility and not have a bunch of weeds growing along the edge and things like that. So for that alone, you might want to control the cattails in that setting. We've got a product called T35 Aquaterra. That's a Team Lab product. It'd be similar to a rodeo, for example. It's a glyphosate product. but it's an aquatic use label. So you can use it on land or in water. And you mix it a gallon to 20 gallons of water and basically just spray the cattails, and it works every time. One consideration on spraying cattails, the best time to spray them is after you see this seed head. If you're spraying them before that, you may get a kill, but to get a good kill on the root and everything, it's best to wait till you see the seed head. Purple loose stripe, don't see a lot of that in wastewater ponds, I guess, but it is a nuisance aquatic weed, and that same product, the Aquaterra, works very well on that. Basically, any type of emergent weed growing out, exposed out into the air, cattails or loose stripe or just grassy weeds coming out of the water, our Aquaterra does an excellent job on all that stuff. And that's the Aquaterra there. It comes in a 2.5 gallon jug. You mix it a gallon to 20 gallons of water. Lots of my customers have wastewater ponds buy Aquaterra every year. It works like a charm. And you can use it around town and stuff too if you want. It's not just something you have to use out of the ponds. If you want to go spray a fence or something else, you could, around trees or whatnot. So it's kind of handy that you can use it in both settings, aquatic or land application. Signet Plus, that's that wetting agent that we talked about. You can use that with Reward and some of these other things just to help. It's a wetting agent that helps get a little better kill, better contact. Here's some of the different choices. The Sonar's up here. Hydrothol liquid, it's a 2.5 gallon jug. Reward, same thing, 2.5 gallon jug. Here's the hydrothol granule. We don't sell a whole lot of that because generally when we're selling hydrothol, it's for Planktonic Algae. If we're going after Planktonic Algae, the liquid version of hydrothol is better. It just disperses through the water better. And then Aquaterra, that's our product for spraying the cattails and marginal weeds sticking out of the water. Flood control, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but one point to make is as sludge buildups as it builds up in your pond and reaches excessive levels, nitrogen and phosphorus that are part of the sludge will slowly be released, and this will contribute to water quality problems, algae blooms, things like that. So that there is a kind of a cause and effect between sludge accumulation in ponds and the availability of nutrients and things for algae and other weeds to grow on. I'll keep moving here. This is going into a few products that we have that are not aquatic use products. Trikill Plus, that's a product that the same company that makes Trimec makes this for us, Trikill Plus. So essentially if you're out spraying anything with a leaf on it, clover, dandelions, thistle, anything like that. And there are quite a few guys that spray their wastewater ponds with our Trikill Plus. If nothing else, just to again maintain it as a facility type, setting, and also it makes mowing and things easier when you don't have a bunch of weeds there when you're just cutting grass. So it does get used a lot for that. Aquaterra, it shows up here again. Total Kill, that's a sterile type product you mix with water. Terminator, another one that's a sterile type product. A lot of guys use that on fence lines, things like that. The nice thing is you have bare ground all year. You spray it once and you're done for the year. So that's what a lot of guys like Terminator. The downside is it does smell kind of, it's got petroleum smell to it. And it can stain like on sidewalks, things like that. Terra Plus, this is a product that we came out with last year, and essentially everybody that bought this product last year bought it again. Last year was the first time we've had it in the market, this Terra Plus. What it is, it's the latest technology weed killer. It combines glyphosate and imazapyr. So what that is, glyphosate is like Roundup. So what the product does is it kills any vegetation present, just like Roundup would, but it's got this extra ingredient called imazapyr in it. What imazapyr is, it's a chemical that prevents germination of any seed. So just like if you were out in your lawn at home or whatever, putting out a crabgrass preventer, what makes crabgrass preventer work is that it prevents the grass seeds from germinating for crabgrass and specifically. So it prevents crabgrass seeds from germinating and growing. Everything else is fine. That's how you prevent crabgrass, with the crabgrass preventer. What this imazapyr is kind of the same principle, but it prevents any seed from germinating and growing. Grass, weeds, crabgrass, anything. So essentially what this new product does is we're getting the kill with the glyphosate, and there's no regrowth for a year because of the imazapyr. It's water-based, there's no smell, no stink. You can spray it uptown on the sidewalk, there's no smell, no woody stain, and it's once a year, you know. So that's a product that we, like I said, we came out last year with our first year with it, and I think that's probably going to be something in the future that's going to really be a product of the future, because we've had some of our suppliers tell us the ground sterilants days are numbered. So we knew we were going to have to move forward with everybody wants a product you spray once and you're done for the year. And sterilant has been the only way to do that in the past, but like I said, I think there's going to be a point when that stuff's just not available anymore, and we're kind of ahead of it with this one. So, and this is far cheaper as well because you're mixing with water. So, there's a picture of that. It's in the 2.5 gallon jugs again, which are nice when you're mixing, you know, into a spray tank. 5 gallon pails and things like that, they're a little harder to handle. That's another sterilant that's probably days are numbered there, a granular sterilant. Aquatic, this is what we sold for 25 years. This is what we had before Reward. And the real difference between 38 Aquatic and Reward is that Reward is just far more concentrated. It's just a better value for the money. So when we came out with Reward, essentially we discontinued our old Aquatic, just because Reward is the better product. Kind of on a different note, but this Root Force root destroyer, this is for roots that are in sewer lines, for tree roots and that. We just came out with this not very long ago, and it's a diclofenac herbicide. If any of you have ever used Root X before, this is the same basically label as Root X. It's the same amount of diclofenac and everything, it's just not Root X. Root X has had a monopoly on the market for about 20 years. I'm sure you all know that. The Hercules Chemical Company, I don't know how they did it, but they came out with a way to basically use the same formula, the diclofenac formula. And it's a foaming reptile. It's in bags, just like a lot of our other products are. You just drop the bags in the manhole and it foams up, and whatever tree roots it contacts, it kills them. So that's something pretty new as well. Moving on that. And then, of course, reading fall label directions and all that stuff. That's pretty much what we've got prepared here on the presentation. I don't know if there's anything, probably some additional questions I would think. Anybody got a question?